This is part 2 of topic 3, perfect competition, and in this presentation we're looking at market efficiency and different forms of market intervention in competitive markets. So in this first diagram I just wanted to remind you of what consumer surplus is. It's the area below the demand curve and above the price line P1, and producer surplus is the area below the price line P1 but above the supply curve. Now let's have a look at, in terms of market efficiency, let's consider the first unit of output. Above the first unit of output there's a point there on the supply curve. That is the minimum selling price that the supplier is willing to receive to produce that unit of output. It actually reflects the variable production costs of that unit. And let's say that that amount there is $10. If we head up to the demand curve, there's a point on the demand curve above unit 1. And that is the value of that first unit to a consumer, to a certain consumer out in the market. And let's assume that that value is $30. So what we've got here is a situation where for the first unit of output, producers can actually produce that first unit of output for $10, but a particular consumer out there is willing to pay $30 for it. So that's a $20 gain from trade. And that $20 gain from trade, the difference between $10 and $30, that is going to be split between consumer and producer surplus depending upon what the market price is. But in terms of market efficiency, what we really have to acknowledge is that that first unit should actually be produced. It's a very valuable unit because it costs $10 to produce, but a consumer values that unit at $30. It would be madness not to actually allocate $10 worth of resources to create $30 worth of value. The same argument applies for units number 2 and 3 and 4. For all of those units right up till Q1, the marginal cost of producing them is less than the value of those units to consumers in monetary terms. So Q1 is the point where output should actually stop. If we go beyond Q1, for whatever reason, let's just say that the government came along and told this market it needed to produce more than Q1, the problem with that is that the marginal cost of producing those units beyond Q1, given by the points along the supply curve, actually exceed the value of those units being produced to the consumers. So we're actually spending more money to produce those units beyond Q1 than those units are worth to consumers. It makes no sense to produce beyond Q1 at all. So Q1 is the right output level. It is what we call the allocatively efficient output level. That is, the market is allocating the right amount of resources, capital and labour, to the production of this particular good. And one of the benefits of competitive markets is that a competitive market which has a flexible price, many buyers, many sellers, no one can affect the price, the market determines the price. One of the advantages of that competitive market is that it will automatically move to P1 Q1. So if there are no externalities in this market, then that outcome is perfect from a welfare sense. Okay, then once we appreciate the value of competitive markets and how they generate allocatively efficient outcomes, there are a number of interventions that we need to look at, and what we'll be doing is looking at some of these interventions and determining how they actually affect the market outcome. The first one is a tax. Now before I go any further, just imagine that this supply curve S1 actually extends down to the vertical axis at point I. So you may actually want to draw that in. Take the supply curve S1 downwards so that it intersects the vertical axis close to point I. So what I've done here, I've drawn a diagram with a tax imposed, and the dollar amount of the tax is equal to the vertical distance between S1 and S2. The initial equilibrium prior to the tax is P1 Q1, and I'll quickly tell you what the consumer and producer surplus was. Before the tax, when the equilibrium was at point F, consumer surplus was ADF and producer surplus was DFI. Now the tax is imposed and the market equilibrium moves to point C, so the price is PC and the quantity is Q2. Now remember what happens. Consumers pay the price PC, but then those producers need to hand over the tax revenue to the government. So the tax revenue per unit is PC minus PP, that vertical distance there. So producers get to keep PP per unit, the price PP per unit here on the vertical axis. So after the tax, consumer surplus actually falls to ABC. Producer surplus falls to GHI. So in determining producer surplus, we have to consider the price that producers, or the amount of money producers get to keep after they have collected the market price from consumers and handed over the tax revenue to the government, which is the price PP. So PP is almost the post-tax price for producers, and because we're dealing with a post-tax price, because tax has been sort of taken out of this price of PP, we revert back to the supply curve S1 in determining the producer surplus. Okay, so PP, the tax has been paid, the tax is out of the way now in terms of the producers. They get to keep PP, and because the tax is now off our hands in a sense, we sort of revert back to S1 as the supply curve that we use to calculate the producer surplus. So producer surplus is GHI. Tax revenue is BCHG. So that is the vertical distance between the two supply curves. CH is tax per unit, and tax is paid on Q2 units. And finally, the area CFH is deadweight loss. Now, of that deadweight loss, CEF was consumer surplus, but now that area is gone. It's just disappeared because the output level has actually fallen to Q2. EFH, that area was producer surplus, but that area is just gone because the output level has fallen. So when we actually reduce the output level to Q2 by imposing a tax on this market, there is now no longer any surplus to the right of Q2. All of that surplus that was there is just gone, and that is what we call a deadweight loss. Okay, the next analysis is the economics of a price floor. When a price floor is imposed, the new market price becomes P floor, so the price cannot actually fall below that level. At that price floor at point A, the quantity will actually fall well below, the quantity produced in the market will fall well below the output level Q1, which was at the initial equilibrium. So what we have here is a situation where, because of the price has increased, consumer surplus is now equal to the area CS, producer surplus is the area PS, and a deadweight loss has actually been created, equal to DWL. So once again, the market intervention creates a deadweight loss. One thing that I haven't considered in this diagram, simply because I want you to focus at this point on consumer surplus, producer surplus, and the deadweight loss, is that to actually make a price floor like this effective, very often the government will come along and buy up the excess supply equal to AB. And so that's another a sort of secondary issue that is associated with this policy, but we won't go into that at this stage. Okay, that's the economics of a price floor. The next thing that I wanted to look at was market failure.